Hey, Josh.
Yeah, Kendrick.
If you were trapped in an airport, and by trapped I mean able to go but didn't want to leave, would you say the janitor is your best friend?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Talk to you later.
All right, have a good one.
Hit it, boy.
Get together, have a few laughs.
Uh-oh, shit, lady, do I sound like I'm ordering a pizza?
Hey, put the freaking gun down on the ground right now. Take your son across the freaking street and say that till he's gonna get you.
Hello and welcome to Where There's a Willis, There's a Way, a film podcast about the multitude of works by Bruce Willis. My name is Josh Carter, and with me as always
is Kendrick Martin.
So today we're going to be talking about the movie Die Hard 2, nicknamed Die Harder. Officially named that in some places, but at least nicknamed it in our hearts for sure. And Bruce Willis in particular. So we're going to wrap up by doing the Wheel of Willis and rank this amongst the other movies that we've talked about.
That's right, Josh. And since you mentioned it, I'm actually curious. Is Die Harder part of the official name? It's on the movie poster.
Yeah, I think that it's like a unofficial subtitle, I want to say. I looked it up on IMDb a while ago, or maybe it was on Wikipedia. I can't remember which. I'm sure I could find out with some amount of clicking. Let's see. Die Harder. Not on IMDb. Die Harder.
Yeah, IMDb just says the tagline is Die Harder.
Okay, so the film's on-screen title is Die Hard 2, as also given in the initial home video release official website. The film's original advertising used Die Harder as a tagline, and many releases of the film, for example, the 2006 DVD release and the 2007 Blu-ray release, were marketed under the title Die Hard 2, Die Harder. But it sounds like you can kind of do whatever you want to with it. You're not bound by one thing or another.
While I was looking stuff up on this movie, doing some research, I found out that in other countries they call it different titles, which is fairly normal. And in Russia, they call all of the Die Hard series movies, they call them the Hard Nut to Crack movies, which
I see.
I find much more explanatory than Die Harder.
Yeah.
And there's another country, I don't remember where, but another country calls it something about like the Glass Escape, referring to Die Hard 1. They call all of them that. So it's like the Glass Escape 2 or the Glass Escape 3 or whatever, which I think is funny because like I don't think there's a glass. You're not escaping a glass tower escape in any other movies.
Yeah.
But we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, we might be. Wow, spoiler alert.
Yeah.
There is not the same tower. It's not the same exact movie as the first one.
Right. There's not even a tower.
Yeah.
Well, there is a tower, but a different
There
kind
is a tower.
of tower.
Yeah, exactly.
Josh.
Yeah.
If I was a listener and I had a tweet to send.
Just any old tweet waiting for some recipient.
Yeah.
Right?
And that tweet was like Die Hard related or Bruce Willis related. Do you know some way that I could send it in a directed way?
Yeah, I sure do. If you tweet at williswaypod, it will fly into our little tweet basket and we will get it.
Yeah, that's right. And if you'd rather email using the old-fashioned email method, you could do williswaypod@gmail.com.
That's right. So please talk to us. We're lonely.
Well, speak for yourself.
Yeah. I was just trying to like shame people into talking to us. I'm not actually lonely right now. I'm feeling okay. Yeah. So before we hop into talking about Die Hard 2 and all the specifics of it, just so everybody is aware, you can find this movie on HBO right now. and there will be spoilers. And we are going to play some audio from the trailer for Die Hard 2, so sit back and enjoy.
Listen, honey, when you land, can we check into a hotel or leave the kids with your parents? Order some room service?
You're on, Lieutenant.
I'll see you in about a half an hour, honey.
Jingle bell rock.
Christmas Eve.
Is there a cop on duty around here?
Airport police.
Go get him.
Jingle bells swing and jingle bells ring.
Washington, D.C. International Airport.
What's this about?
Oh, just a feeling I have.
Ouch. When you get those feelings, insurance companies start to go bankrupt.
The towers lost control.
Instrument landing system is down.
Backup systems won't come up. We've got blizzard conditions. Zero visibility.
Attention all controllers. We have a code red alert.
There's panic in the air.
Professional mercenary. You got the world's biggest drug dealer on his way here now. What do you need, a slide rule to figure this out? You get the hell out of my office before I throw you out of my damn airport.
All right, that audio was from the trailer of Die Hard 2, Die Harder. Die Hardier. I'm going to read the description from IMDb. John McClane's attempt to avert disaster as rogue military operatives seize control of Dulles International Airport in Washington, D.C. And as we said before, we're going to spoil the whole plot of this movie. You can find it on HBO or other video on demand services. So, before we dive into specifics, Josh, how did you like this movie? Did you like it better or worse? Well, first of all, I assume this is the first time you've seen it since you hadn't.
Yeah, I haven't seen any of the Die Hard movies at all before starting this podcast, and I definitely had not seen the second one.
Yep, same here. So how did you like it, and what did you think of it compared to the first one?
I would say that I definitely liked it less than the first one. I did not think that it was as good. I have a bunch of different problems with it, which we can go into later. But I was a little bit let down by this movie, I'd feel. What about you?
I feel the same way. I think Bruce Willis's performance in particular, I thought was as good as the first movie. I had a lot of issues with the rest of the setup, though, which we'll get to.
I think Bruce Willis is in like a pretty good groove with this movie. Like, you can definitely feel that he's got a good sense of the character and stuff, and it's a good character for him to play. But the rest of the movie around him is kind of determines how good the movie is as a whole, because he's consistent. And I think that the rest of the movie around him failed him.
I agree, which is kind of sad because on paper it has all the plot points and elements of what you'd think it'd be a great movie. If you're out there and you haven't listened to our Die Hard episode, I would recommend that, because the original Die Hard movie is what really kicked off the whole trend of Die Hard. And I think the series, while being Bruce Willis's most well-known series, it's really that first movie that kind of cemented this concept. And when you think of the Die Hard stories, to me, what I think of is you're dealing with limited resources and you're in a single place and you're fighting kind of a prepared enemy who's trying to achieve some goal.
And you're usually fighting alone.
I think,
or pretty much alone. Yeah.
Correct. Yep. Yeah. And there's been a lot of movies we mentioned last time. There's been a lot of other movies. This has kind of spawned its own genre almost of like Die Hard like movies. So like we mentioned, this movie being set in an airport, it seems that there would be a lot there, but it ends up falling over repeatedly.
And I think that there's like a lot of issues that led to it falling over repeatedly. And I'm not like a super big hard ass on movies. Like, if I'm having a good time with it, I'm not going to be thinking about like all the different parts where a movie's writing has really let it down. But if the movie is not fun enough to where I am starting to let my mind wander and think about the plot and how things don't make sense and don't add up, it's not a good thing. Not a good thing at all. And this movie does that. So part of it is obviously the directing, because ideally, even if you're given really shitty material, you can make something that's compelling to a certain extent. And then a good chunk of this lies with the writing. And that kind of makes me wonder, like, was the writing in the first movie tons and tons better, or was it just much better directed and acted? Like, what do you think?
So my main problem with this movie, and well, first of all, I want to respond quickly to what you said. It's interesting you say that, because I read Roger Ebert's review, and he liked this movie much better than the last Die Hard, the first one, because he felt like it was over the top enough that you could just shut your brain off to the plot holes.
Yeah.
Whereas the first one, he found that it wasn't fun enough to watch as far as a summer blockbuster. Granted, that review was written when the movie came out, 30 years ago. So it may just be an element of the times that we have expanded on this concept so much better that it's hard to view this in the lens of what 1990 would have looked like. But getting back to your question, my main issue with this movie was kind of the free reign that John McClane has. And he is all over the place. He's going up into the aircraft tower. He's going down to the sewer pipes. He's going out to the runway, to the different parts of the terminal. And he's interacting with people here and there. And I felt like what made the first movie so good was he was on his own and he was kind of trapped. And while he was trapped, he was outsmarting the bad guys.
Yeah, I would agree with all that. I think that is a very important part that is missing from this movie. I think that even with him roaming around, there was other things that didn't really work great either. It is interesting though that you bring up like his kind of ingenuity and stuff like that, because I think one of the scenes that worked the best for me in this movie is when I think the second fight scene where they're fighting the bad guys dressed up in paint costumes. By the way, if you've seen Terminator 2, the T-1000 is one of the bad guys. But Robert Patrick or something? Yeah. So they during that fight sequence, there's like a bad guy that his gun is jammed, so he's just running at Bruce Willis, and he's got a knife or something like that. I don't even remember fully. But Bruce Willis hits this button to make the moving walkway come towards him, and it brings a gun to him because he's stuck underneath something. And it's this very tense moment of Bruce Willis seeing the problem, figuring out a solution, doing the solution, and then you still aren't quite sure if it's going to work, and then it does. And that part I thought worked really, really great. And there's tiny little moments like that work great. But by and large, I think that the action just isn't shot in a way that really resonated with me. There's not a whole lot of problem solving that you're seeing during fight sequences. And that's what you want in a fight sequence. You want it to be like a issue arises that the audience and the character sees. The character figures out a solution, does the solution, then the other person has that same experience, just counter. And whenever there's just like random shots of Bruce Willis shooting at people or whatever, it just doesn't resonate if you don't see the peril that he's in at first. And I don't think that the directing is as competent in showing that as like the first movie was.
Really good point. While I was watching this, I thought to myself, man, this movie feels really long. And if you had asked me, I would have thought it was much longer than the first Die Hard, but actually, no, it was shorter by about 10 minutes. And I think your point about him problem solving is what made that movie seem so long. Was we're seeing very little John McClane having to think on the fly like he did in that first movie. In the first movie, he has to deal with being trapped in a vent, being trapped, in an elevator, having no shoes, dealing with glass, having no supplies, having to
at first having no gun, right?
Get a hold of the cops. Yeah, right, having no gun. And then he has to convince the cops to show up.
Yeah.
And he has all these challenges he has to overcome. Whereas this one, it's basically him. The only challenge he has to overcome is kind of the bureaucracy of the people around him, which we talked a little about in the first Die Hard, and it felt like the Die Hard series, at least so far, the main thrust of the kind of story is bureaucracy, and the system is dumb and slow, and if you're on your own, you're the lone wolf, you're going to operate much better. And I think in the first Die Hard that you could kind of see, you could concede the argument, but this movie just felt way too over the top, especially with the
that one police officer guy,
airport police chief, Carmine Lorenzo, played by Dennis Franz, which the name Carmine is I can't hear without thinking of Carmine Falcone, the bad guy in Batman. It just sounds like such a silly name to name your character, but
and I didn't think that that guy did a terrible job. I just don't think that the material that he was given was anything more than a very two-dimensional character. And I mean, at one point in the movie, I wrote this down because it seemed so specifically stated, but the general or the major, I can't remember what the army guy's name is, what his title is, but his character's name is Grant, played by John Amos. And he, at one point, just says, "Get this bureaucrat out of here," literally word for word. And that is, I think, exactly what they wanted the audience to feel by that. And so they just keep pounding away with the same point over and over and over again. And it just gets really old.
So I've had a lot of negative stuff to say about this movie, but I want to point out some things I did like. William Sadler plays kind of the head bad guy, and I know him best as Death from Bill and Ted. And I thought I enjoyed his performance. I don't think he achieved the same level of camp and brilliance that Hans Gruber was in the first Die Hard, but really that's a high bar to pass. But I thought he had a great performance, and it's that beginning when he's for some reason doing his yoga naked in the hotel room. I saw that and I was like, what are we witnessing right now? It was
a very specific,
it was so bananas
power move for that character. That I thought that sequence was really weird, but I don't know.
He's so confident in his masculinity and abilities that I guess he feels like he can do his workout in the hotel. I did love that scene though, where right after that he walks out of the hotel, his hotel room, and he's walking down the hallway. And as he walks down the hallway, every door next to him, like a henchman comes out of. I thought that was like super cool and didn't make any sense. Like, if you're a bad guy, you're just waiting for the, ringmaster to walk by so you can open your door on. Like, it didn't make any sense, but I thought visually it was really well done.
I would agree.
Another thing I really liked about this movie was we got to watch the bad guys kind of set up their base in that church outside the airport. And I love watching a movie where the bad guy is super intelligent and you see like him lay his whole plan out, and they roll in all this equipment and they set it all up and they have all these plans and they tick through the steps, and every time something happens, they're like, all right, this is exactly what we expected. I thought that was all super enjoyable, and I think one of the great things about this kind of movie is we get to watch like really smart bad guys who think they have everything figured out kind of get foiled by the wrench on the plans.
Yeah, I think that by and large, I'm less inclined to like movies with dumb bad guys. But yeah.
Yep, I agree. So a couple other things about this movie that I feel like are worth mentioning. It's our first movie that we're reviewing that was released during the 90s, and there's not a hard kind of line set, between the 90s and 89 technologically, but I think it's worth noting how different things were, even it wasn't that long ago, from they are today, specifically around airports. So another thing we mentioned in the Die Hard 1 episode was any movie around a terrorist act, especially around explosions, post 9/11 kind of sits differently. And this movie, in a high-rise specifically, but this one being the second one was set in an airport and was all dealing with airplanes. So again, I felt like all my same feelings that I had last time were repeated. Hopefully Die Hard 3 is neither in a high-rise nor in an airport. But also, this movie talks a lot about the drug war, which was really in full swing in 1990, and America's interference in South American countries, specifically around, which they had been doing for the better part of the 20th century, but quashing any communist, budding communist or socialist countries to kind of make sure that they get a capitalist empire in place, and they would do that via guns and supporting warlords and
even
things.
Drugs sometimes.
This movie kind of deals with that in a little bit. It doesn't really talk about it a whole lot, but it's just a good reminder of how much in the news that was then. And they talk about how the general that that's the main prize that they're trying to steal is a major criminal. I think the newscaster says this is the first major trial that the drug war, quote unquote, will hold. And I think being 30 years removed from that, and kind of like relearning our history and how the drug war was really more of a way for the government to kind of utilize its influence and quash dissension, and less of a heralded savior of the youth, of the people that we thought it was maybe in the 90s. Yeah. I think that also sat differently. So it was a challenge separating my thoughts of that right from the get-go, of being like, this movie is about terrorists in an airport and it's about the drug war. So those are two kind of like major elements that I think I'm curious as to what we'll be experiencing as we go through the 90s. I know Bruce Willis doesn't only do action movies in the 90s, at least not for the early part of the 90s, but it's always interesting looking at the movies as an artifact of their time, and as the pop culture and our like collective conscious kind of changes over time when we start to figure things out. I'll be interested to see how that progresses.
Definitely. I totally agree with everything that you just said. Yeah. Even though like the bad guys are, obviously it has that background fleshing it out, I did kind of feel like their motives were even less fleshed out than the first movie, and it almost just felt like they were bad guys just because they were bad guys, and I wasn't as crazy about that. Like, I kind of wanted to know why the bad guys had their skin in the game, but I don't really feel like you got that much. And so you're just supposed to believe that like all these people are throwing away their military careers and risking their life for this guy just because they like him. But I don't know. I didn't really buy the bad guy's motivations as much, which kind of made me less inclined to get with the movie in general, because some good motivations can at least excuse away some amount of dumb stuff in a movie, but they didn't even have that in this movie. So That was kind of an issue. I felt like it almost felt like the bad guy version of the works for the business, and we do the charts at the business, the reports at the business, the meetings at the business. It's like, oh, we have the guns at the bad guy's base, we have the bombs at the bad guy's base, we do bad guy things at bad guy base. Just felt maybe a little bit unrealistic. Not that Die Hard has to be super, super realistic. It's literally called Die Hard, and it's about one cop that fights a bunch of bad guys. But I guess I wanted it to try a little bit harder. I wanted to try hard to try harder rather than Die Hard to die harder.
So there should have been Die Hard to try harder.
Try harder. Try harder to write a better movie. It's probably what I would have called it. Yeah. I wrote down a bunch of different stuff with the writing, directing, producing issues that I had with this movie, because I had a lot of them. It felt like every couple of minutes something would kick me back out of enjoying the movie. Like I would get into it for a tiny bit, and then I would just get launched back into real life, and it was really unpleasant. One of the things that was in this movie is that I didn't really remember the music in the first movie being amazing or being that bad. It was all fine. I remember that there was like a cool remix of a Christmas song that was like a menacing version. But that's kind of like it as far as the stuff that I really remember. And the end sequence, the Christmas song. But in this movie, every time there were bad guys, it felt very, if you've seen like the 1960s Mission Impossible, like it's the bad guys theme, bum, 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 bum. Like there's just very bad guy themes around the bad guys. So there's no ambiguity about what's going on. You don't have like a whole Jason Bourne moment where you're trying to figure out who's actually bad, who's actually good. US doesn't always equal good. Who's the US guys that are bad? All that sort of stuff. You don't really feel that as much because they're so overt with all of the themes. And like even in the first shootout, the music is just really, really odd. Like it almost sounds quirky. It doesn't sound intense to me at all. So I don't really know what's going on with that, but I did not like the music nearly as much in this movie. It was distractingly bad and pulled me out of the moments. And that was an issue that I had with it for sure.
Yeah, the music went right over my head up until the ending, which we'll get to later. Tell me some other issues you have.
As far as the writing goes, I started making a list of stuff. So I'll get to my biggest issue later, but some different issues that I had was a goon comes up to William Sadler and is like, "I'm so sorry, Mr. Boss. We did not do as well as we could have done." And then William Sadler's like, "And for your insolence, you will pay." And he clicks a gun in his face. And then the gun ends up being empty. And then he's like, "Oh, well." And then it's just supposed to be like a threatening moment. But then you realize that William Sadler just keeps an empty gun around for threatening-based purposes. And that doesn't make any sense at all. Because like it's so ridiculous. Like literally in about maybe a third of the way through the movie, Bruce Willis is going around being like, "Wow, another elevator, another basement. Wow, everything is happening again." Like as if it's the writers being like, "This movie is kind of similar. Should we say something about it?" They're like, "Yeah, just throw a line in there." That's what it felt like. So that was another issue that I had with it. And also, every single person in this movie basically knows who John McClane is. Like, he'll meet some, except for at the beginning when he meets the cops, but like, William Sadler knows who John McClane is. This like random drug guy knows who John McClane is. And I guess maybe they did a quick Google search before they decided to do this whole mission, but it seems ridiculous that they know who this guy is when he stopped a terrorist attack on the other side of the country a year ago, but you don't really hear too much about terrorist attacks being stopped unless it's like local news or it's a really, 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 really big deal. So it just seemed weird that like everybody knew who he was, at least to me. That was another issue I had with it. The British plane and the writing and directing of that was so cringe to me. The yippee-ki-yay at the end felt really unearned to me.
Oh, yeah.
Then Marvin the janitor, I could not stand that guy. Every single time. So throughout the movie, Bruce Willis will take a little like pit stop checkpoint moment and go back to this janitor that's inside the air traffic control tower. And he'll just like have a short conversation with him. And there's like at one point he stops a record from playing and he like messes with the guy's maps because he's just trying to do Bruce Willis stuff. And then this guy keeps jutting his way into these scenes and being like, oh no, I'm Marvin the janitor, I gotta help you out. And he's like in the end sequence as well. I hated that character. So I don't know.
I kind of read that as kind of a replacement for the Reginald Val Johnson character in the first movie.
Yeah.
Like Bruce Willis needed someone to talk to, and I think that was kind of who that was supposed to be. I was really disappointed in the Reginald Val Johnson's role in this movie. I thought he just showed up once to eat some Twinkies and deal with a fax, and I was like, "Oh, we're gonna see more of him?"
Yep,
nope,
I have more stuff to talk about with him. Yeah, but the biggest problem that I had with the writing is just so many moments of unbelievable craziness going on. Like, just not even... I'm okay if you take the real world as the base and then do a heightened version of the real world because it's cinema. And then you can even do a heightened version of that because it's action cinema. That's fine. But there's so many things that do not make sense. Like, there's the air traffic control tower is so loud. Normally they're not that loud so that you could hear what's going on. In an actual emergency, you would definitely not just have the planes fly around for hours and hours and hours. You'd be like, hey, we're about to lose contact, go land somewhere else. The not communicating with the public did not make any sense to me at all. The other air traffic control towers not stepping in that are in the nearby area and being like, hey, you guys have been up there a while. Or any of the planes not talking to each other didn't make any sense to me either, because the planes wouldn't have to communicate with the ground. They could just communicate with each other. The whole bad guys getting on the biggest and slowest plane that they could possibly find at the end, even though there's only 25 of them, just made no sense. So many things in this movie made no sense to me.
Yeah, and I think an action movie's plot can be full of plot holes if the set pieces are all really well done. And unfortunately, this movie was a little too long, and the set pieces were a little too contrived that left time for you to think about that. Before we move on to some trivia facts, because I have a couple of things to talk about, is there any other overall thoughts you have just on this movie in general?
Yeah, I've actually got a pretty controversial thought. I want to proposition that John McClane is a bad guy in this movie.
Interesting. Tell me your argument.
First off, I'm just going to say, maybe if he's not the bad guy, but he is not somebody that helps the overall situation. So first off, he is totally wrong about his car sequence at the beginning. Like, he's parking his car in a loading no park zone and just expecting to get away with it because he's a cop, and he's trying to flex on the other cops because he's a cop and get them to just ignore it. Plus, it's and
he's going to be there for hours. Like, his wife's plane is a ways away.
And we're supposed to be rooting for him, and I was not. From the get-go, I was like, fuck you, asshole. I was so frustrated at him. And then later, when he's suspicious of those bad guys at the cafe or whatever in the airport, he doesn't go tell the cops because he's like, oh, this guy had it out for me earlier because he towed my car, so I'm just not going to tell them that there's suspicious behavior going on here, which wouldn't make any sense. Like, if you're a cop and you want to stop the bad guys and you are convinced that something shady's going on, you would let them know and you would get over your stupid, like, just macho-ness, but he doesn't at all. He doesn't even try to do that. And it was dumb. It was very stupid. The other thing is that the bad guys kill a lot of people, and they keep killing a lot of people because the good guys are rebelling against them. And the bad guys would presumably let all the civilians that they have as hostages up in the air, they presumably let them land if they just got their way. Bruce Willis prevents them from getting their way, and all of those people on that one flight die as a part of it. 280 people, 230 people, something like that, on that one British flight. And a bunch of other people are sacrificed as well. So a lot of people die basically just because Bruce Willis cannot keep his gun holstered and just go, you know what, if I get involved, a lot more people are going to die. Because it's not like the situation at the tower where it was all hostages contained in one area and there isn't a whole lot left up to chance because the bad guys are totally in control of the situation. This movie is a lot different. There's a lot more stuff left up to chance. The hostages are spread out. There's and they're all up in the sky too, so it's not something that he can directly affect. So it just seems like he, by jumping in there, was almost like a representation of the U.S. inserting ourselves into different conflicts that we had no business being in, and then causing greater damage because we were there than if we had just let things play out. And two, he is not at all following or respecting the chain of command. And I know that he thinks that he's hot stuff, and then the script makes him into hot stuff, but I just do not think that he had any right to do all that stuff. That's my argument. That's my super hot take about this movie.
That's interesting. I don't quite agree, fair. But yeah. That's fine.
Like I said, it's a hot take. I'm saying that the good guy in a movie is a bad guy. So
it is a little bit of a spicy take.
Did you have any other thoughts on the rest of the stuff before we hop into trivia things?
Nope. I think I'm ready to go straight to trivia.
Sounds good.
So the biggest trivia topic, first of all, is our Star Trek connection. And I did not look up anything about this movie beforehand, and I was very excited to see that it was a fairly straightforward connection to Star Trek, that we did not require to be an oboe player.
Yeah, Tom Boyd, your services are not required yet.
So we're speaking, of course, of Cole Meany, the pilot of the British aircraft, which there's a scene in which that aircraft crashes and everyone on board dies. And that was when this movie really lost me, because that was horrific.
It was extremely horrific.
And it's just kind of like, oh no, it's a dangerous time out there. And I'm like, we just watched them take take care of this little old lady and get her tea.
Yeah, this movie, I think I read this movie had the highest body count out of any Die Hard movie, and that does not surprise me at all, because there's so many people that die. Yeah. Oh, yeah, so Cole Meany.
But Cole Meany,
right,
was the pilot of that plane, and he's best known as Miles O'Brien from Next Generation, D69, several movies, and one of my favorite characters in Star Trek, so I was really glad to see him. And
once he died, he played Chief O'Brien. And And then the bonus Star Trek connection is actually the villain, William Sadler, was also in several Star Trek episodes. Yeah.
Nice. I still think he's best as Death from Bill and Ted. But
yeah, in the Star Trek episodes, he plays a like secret agent guy within Star Trek's the Federation's like secret CIA thingamabobber. To go into more detail would be spoilery, but he's great in that. I've liked him in basically everything that I've seen, but Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey is definitely his best performance.
Yes, he's also in Bill and Ted Face the Music that came out last year. Yeah, it was enjoyable. If you liked the earlier Bill and Ted's, you will like that Bill and Ted.
One other thing that I wanted to bring up with this movie is if you look at IMDb, you will see that the guy that plays Al, Reginald Johnson, is fourth billed in this movie, which means that he probably has the best agent in all of Hollywood because he is in one fucking scene. So if you are...
And he's not even... He's just on the phone.
He doesn't talk to Bruce Willis face-to-face at all. Yeah. Another fun little trivia bit is this movie has notoriously bad dubbing. The 90s in general, especially the early 90s, had some really bad TV dubbing. And this movie, if you Google dubbing Die Hard 2, you will see so many great scenes. And my favorite one is at the end when Bruce Willis kills the bad guy plane. He just goes like, "Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker." And in the dub, he goes, "Yippee-ki-yay, Mr. Falcon," at the end of the movie. There's no character named Mr. Falcon at all. I do not know where they got that, and it's the best thing ever. Yeah.
That is great.
Yeah, just tremendous. For those of you that have listened in on other stuff, we've talked about the money and how much each movie has made. I'm not going to go recap everything for everybody, but this movie did have a budget of $70 million, which is quite a bit higher than everything else that Bruce Willis had done at this point. Die Hard, when it was made, was $35 million for the budget, so it's double it. And it brought in $240 million, which is the second highest out of all of his movies, with the highest obviously being the critical darling Look Who's Talking, which made $297 million. Yeah, but it made more money than the first one. And obviously like Roger Ebert liked it more than the first one, so I guess people seem to like this movie. Yeah,
and I mean, it definitely, like, people came out to see this movie.
One thing that I was kind of thinking about is when you look at other sort of franchise movies, for me, I was expecting this movie to be about on par with the first one. And then I started thinking about how franchise movies kind of start to eventually feel like, like the Fred Meyer or the Winco brand of blah, blah, blah. So like Winco brand soda or whatever. I kind of started to think about it. And I think that the Terminator movies are kind of like soda. Like some are just about as good as the first one. And then a lot of the other ones are pretty bad. Star Wars is kind of like potato chips, where after the first Star Wars movie, they're all potato chips of varying qualities. Some are not that great. Some are pretty good. And Die Hard, for me, kind of feels like Oreos at this point. And knockoff Oreos are not nearly as good as regular Oreos, so we'll see. I'm willing to be impressed by Die Hard 3. I'm hoping that Die Hard 3 is better than Die Hard 2. So I'll hope for that.
I thought you were going to go into like different flavored Oreos, like Oreos with red velvet or other weird Oreo flavors.
Oreos with mint toothpaste. That's how this movie felt to me.
Yeah,
Not
there you go.
Bad. It was not that bad. It just wasn't that good either.
Okay, let's talk specifically about Bruce Willis, and I feel like we kind of covered a lot of the stuff already. I thought, like I said at the beginning, that he plays this character really well, and I think what I love seeing Bruce Willis do is tell kind of quippy jokes as he runs around saving people from mishaps. I read that in the first Die Hard, he ended up ad-libbing some of his lines. And so for this one, they just planned on him to like ad-lib a lot of his quips and one-lines. And I thought that it created a really suave character. And there's like a scene where he flirts with the girl who runs the rental car desk or whatever. And she's like, let's go out for a drink. And he's like, no, I'm married. Like, I think just him kind of being like in his element, but staying true to his main purpose, which was to save his wife from that airplane, I thought created like a really compelling character and was really fun to watch.
I will say that I thought that maybe there was a quip or two too many. That's my main critique with it. Especially at the beginning, about third of the movie, there was a lot of quips. It's like, all right, I could maybe deal with one less. There was one in particular that struck me. Bruce Willis says to the bureaucrat guy, he's like, what sets off the metal detector first? The lead in your ass or the shit in your brains? And then
that didn't make any sense.
I've never had brain shit set off metal detectors. I don't know.
I was like, buddy, I get what you're going for, but what?
Yeah. But for the most part, they were good. There was maybe one other one that was notable for me, but yeah. Yep. Yeah. One thing that I forgot to mention about this director is, he's directed 21 films in total, and 5 movies that he's directed have been nominated for a Razzie for directing, and he's directed 4 movies that have had a positive tomato meter. So maybe he's not the guy to tell Bruce Willis, hey, that's one quip too many. Maybe he is not necessarily the strongest director, and that might have been part of it. I feel like maybe a better director would have known to say, hey, Bruce Willis, the shit in your brains line isn't really working. Maybe try retooling that one, or just walk out in a huff. And this guy's like, it sounds good. Make the movie. It's kind of what it felt like to me.
You're talking about Rennie Harlan, the director of this movie, and I had looked at his IMDb page and did not recognize a lot of that stuff. So it does not surprise me that he's nominated for Razzies. I didn't look up, so maybe you did, but was Die Hard 2 nominated for any awards?
I don't believe so. I don't think so.
Well, you're wrong. I just looked it up. It was nominated for Best Foreign Film by the Japanese Academy. And it won a BMI Film Music Award.
Well, so, I guess...
Turns out there's awards for everybody.
They've got a beef with my critique of the music.
So neither of us have seen Die Hard movies beyond this one. And I'm curious... The progression seems to be of John McClane's character, that he was a New York cop who tried to get together with his wife, and she was more interested in kind of her own career. She moved to LA, and he followed her, now is a cop in LA, and they're back in Washington, D.C. on vacation. Do you feel like his character arc, where do we think this character's headed?
I don't know.
You think every other movie in the Die Hard series is just him at the right place on the wrong time?
I'm going to guess that is the case. I mean, I think that they even have like a line like that in this movie. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, Die Hard 2 is definitely that way. I'm more wondering, like, is Die Hard 3 going to be similar, or is it going to be
like he's more of an active player and getting himself into that situation?
Yeah, like his wife does something terrible and he has to like go kind of fix the problem she's in. I did notice that she is reading like a Nakatomi brief while she's on the plane. So she still works for Nakatomi Corp, and that corporation still exists somehow after losing all their bonds out the window.
And like their head U.S. branch executive as well. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciated that this movie tried to be connected to the first movie, but there was very minimal amounts of crossover, I felt. Like, this movie recaps what happened in the first movie just pretty much instantaneously, and then that's it. You don't need to know anything more about it. So, it's, yeah. Oh, the other thing I was going to say about this movie is I did not get that one sequence on the plane with Holly, like, that had been going on for so long with that other like random guy. Is that guy somebody that appeared in the first movie and I've just forgotten about him?
Yeah, so in the first movie, he is he works for the LA News, and he posts on the news somehow revealing the fact that John McClane is married to her, and gives it away to Hans Gruber that the guy running around killing everybody is her husband. And so, Hans Gruber's like, I'm going to kill you next, right at the end. And then at the end of the movie, she walks out and like punches him in the face. At the end of this movie, during this movie, they bring up the fact that they have a restraining order. I thought a lot of that airplane scene, we haven't really talked about the stuff that goes on on the airplane. Very bizarre. Like they're so excited to use phones on the plane, and was commenting. We were thinking about, as we're watching this movie, we were like, man, it's great they don't have internet because they can't be reading the news about what's going on down in the airport. And then they turn on local news, and I'm like, oh great, now they're going to find out. And instead, they just watch The Simpsons. Yeah,
that whole plane thing was just, I was very lost, and I don't know, it was odd.
Yeah, I agree. Any other thoughts on Bruce Willis?
No, I don't think so.
In Die Hard 2. One other scene I wanted to talk about was, I don't remember which scene it was. I think it was the scene with the grenades, which, by the way, were like the longest timed grenades.
Like 30-second grenades or whatever.
But there's some scene... Yeah, right. There's some scene in which an explosion goes off and Bruce Willis like flies way up into the air and he gets super close to the camera. That's kind of
when he
over
uses
the scene, and then he falls back down.
Ejector seat. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, he uses the ejector seat to get away from the grenades. I thought that was like pretty cool, and I know that this movie was one of the first movies to do some different special effects that were kind of new in the 90s, and I thought a lot of the special effects looked cool. There's a movie called Casino, which I don't know if you've seen. I think it comes out 2 or 3 years later. And it's directed by Martin Scorsese, and it has a similar opening scene. Spoilers for the movie Casino, but the movie opens with Robert De Niro's character kind of being he's in a car bomb explosion. And then later you find out that all he does is get thrown up in the air and then falls back down and survives the car bomb explosion. But a very similar kind of effect where you're watching someone on top of an explosion fly up towards the camera and then back down. And I thought that was really cool.
Yeah,
I like that.
It definitely isn't one of those shots where you see it and you go, wow, this really holds up. But for the time, I'm sure it was amazing.
Yeah.
I thought it was neat. I think that this movie did use a lot of cool stuff with green screen, like the burning plane in the background was green screen and stuff like that. So they were trying to push boundaries and everything. And I think that might be one of the main reasons why the budget is so much higher. That and the fact that there's a lot more actors in this movie than the first movie. and more sets.
Yep.
Yeah. So we've now come to the part of our podcast where we're going to rank all of the Bruce Willis movies that we have seen. Kendrick, do you want to go first?
Sure. So this is the 6th movie we've seen, and I think Die Hard 2, Die Harder, for me falls right in the middle at spot number 3. Right. So before it would be Die Hard and In Country.
Right on. Mine also goes below In Country, and I was thinking about it, and I think I actually like Look Who's Talking more than I like Die Hard 2. So
what?
Yeah. So I think I'd put Die Hard 2 in at my number 4 spot. So it'd be Die Hard, In Country, Look Who's Talking, Die Hard 2, Sunset, and Blind Date. Yeah.
Wow. Look Who's Talking is number 6 for me. So I'm really interested to see our feelings on Look Who's Talking 2. This is our first sequel. I know Bruce Willis, his many movie credits includes a lot of sequels, and a lot of he reprises a lot of the same character over and over again. But I thought, so far Die Hard 2 seemed to John McClane holds up.
Yeah. I'm excited to see what else they do with this character. Hopefully they do something else with the character, and it's not just him reacting to situations, and all the character development that we got was in the first movie. But we'll see.
That's the hope. All right, so now it's time for an important part of this show.
Yeah, I'm assuming that you're referring to the Wheel of Willis, right?
Yeah, and longtime listeners of the show will know that we always say the same thing. Every single time. And we always say it perfectly.
And that is...
Whisk that wheel!
All right. And today... All right, so the question for today is, would you trust this Bruce Willis character to house sit for you? So would you trust John McClane to house sit for you?
So I think it's good to make a note that it's John McClane of Die Hard 2.
Yes.
To house sit for me. I think I would. He seems like he likes taking care of stuff. And I think he would care for my house and my cats and my plants, which is really, the important part of house sitting. What about you, Josh?
In case my critique of John McClane earlier was not enough to go off of, I would say no. I feel like somebody would try to rob my house, and then Bruce Willis would get into a large fight with them, and half of my wall would be blown open when I got back. And he's like, well, I stopped them from stealing your TV. And I'd be like, well, great. I'm sure that this wall is going to cost me less than $300 to fix. So that's perfect.
So you think he attracts mayhem?
I think that he doesn't turn it down. And sometimes if you're looking at things from a negation of the worst outcome, I'm trying to think of what that's called. Damage mitigation. If you're looking at things from a damage mitigation perspective, having Bruce Willis around is maybe not the best idea all the time.
All right. And now we have a special listener submitted response to the Wheel of Willis. If you'd like to submit a listener response to a Wheel of Willis question, you can get a hold of us at williswaypod@gmail.com or tweet at us at williswaypod.
Hey, so my name is Amy, longtime fan, and my answer to the Wheel of Willis question, would you let Bruce Willis, John McClane house sit for me? I think I would. He seems to have a very sensitive heart and cares a lot about things. So we're getting a puppy, and I would just want to make sure he's not roughhousing with a puppy too much. But in terms of like protecting our place, I would trust him. And he seems to have like a gut instinct about people. So if like packages, like mailmen or like kind of crazy people walking around, I think I would trust him to house it. Die Hard 2, I liked it because it was like clever, you know, with like the blanks and the guns and stuff. Whereas the first one was awesome just because of the explosions. And I mean, just Bruce Willis is just trying to show his like badassness, I guess, or whatever, and just like walking through glass. But I liked the second one more because second time watching it, it's just so good.
Thank you, Amy. Now I think we have some emails we're going to read.
Sounds good. So this email is from Nathan, and he sent this to us about our in-country episode, which debuted a couple of weeks ago. And he wrote, the podcast was very in-depth, and I liked this most recent episode, which required less jokes and more analysis, which I thought the both of you did very well. And then he followed up and said, also, the shortest U.S. veteran was Richard Flaherty, Flaherty, and he was 4 feet 9 inches tall, 3 inches too short technically, and he served in Vietnam. So we had mused about if In Country would be more or less entertaining with a half as tall Bruce Willis, and it, regardless of what you think about that, it would be less realistic.
Huh. Thank you, Nathan, for that email. We will strive to not change our jokes.
Yes, the same jokes every week. That's what you can expect here at Where There's a Willis, There's a Way.
All right. I think that's going to wrap up this episode. Josh, it's been wonderful talking to you.
Likewise.
If you would like to follow me, Kendrick, on Twitter, you can follow me at KMartinix, KMartinix.
And if you would like to follow me, you could find me on Twitter at Joshing Carter.
Next time, we will cover our second sequel, Look Who's Talking 2. So looking forward to that conversation and can't wait.
I too can't wait. See you then.
I can't wait too.
I can't wait. Who's talking about Look Who's Talking 2?